using Photoshop along with a couple other Adobe products to edit our photography this semester. So before we dive into kind of the basic introduction to Photoshop, just want to talk about where all of your images, all of your photography will be stored. So these computers, when you log out, everything kind of disappears. You're not logging in with your username or anything like that. So whatever you save, let's say on the desktop, will not be there later on the next time you log in. So it is very, very important that you use Google Drive for storage. So everything that you take pictures of has to be uploaded to Google Drive. Everything you Photoshop has to go into Google Drive. That is the only way to make sure that your artwork is saved and safe. So I personally suggest just making a photography folder in your Drive to make it easier to access. I like to add it to starred, so that way later on the left hand side you'll just click on starred items and you'll see that folder right away. Just easier to find that way. Within your overall photography folder, I would make subfolders for each project and name them as whatever the project is. So our first project is the 5 photos. So I would just label that as is, and later on when we do painting with light, you could name it as painting with light, so on and so forth. So everything is just nice and organized and not just a cluster of random photography. Because you will be taking a lot of initial images. So I went ahead and I have some photos uploaded into one of my folders. So when you're ready to start photoshopping something, I suggest just downloading one photo at a time, just because you're not going to be able to Photoshop a dozen within a day. So just one at a time is good. So I'm just going to click on the photo that I want. And if I want to see a different view, in the kind of menu bar, there is a grid view. So you can look at your photography that way as well. Totally up to you how you want to look at stuff. But I'll just select the image that I want to download. And then there's the 3 vertical dots. So when I kind of hover over it, it says more actions. When I click on that, there is an option at the very bottom that says download. So I'm just going to click that and it's going to download my image. I believe the computers are set up that it downloads automatically to the desktop, but if settings got changed, it might be someplace else, but should be pretty easy to find. Okay. So once your image is downloaded, then you'll be able to open it up in Photoshop. So you all should have logged into Photoshop the correct way with your school email address and making sure that you click that it's a school account. If you do not log in the proper way, it's just going to bump you into a free trial, which will expire, and then it's just going to cause a big old headache later on. So make sure that you're properly signed in. So to initially open up your image, there are a couple of different ways. So you can go in the up top where we have our kind of initial menu bar. You can click File, Open, and that will open up the Finder, and then you can go ahead and find your picture. Another option is on the left-hand side. You have kind of another menu. You can click Open, and that will also open up the Finder for you. Or option number 3 is if you have your picture on your desktop, or if you just have it in a folder hanging out, you can click on the image And you just kind of click and drag it onto the Photoshop icon. And that will also automatically open it up in Photoshop. Okay, so 3 different ways, whichever you're most comfortable with, they all do the same thing. So, with Photoshop, there are a lot of different areas and sections, so we'll kind of talk about that first, just so you know where all the things are. Up top, you have your general menu bar. So you have, the Photoshop, that's where you can quit. You have File, which allows you to, open up new images, along with all the saving properties. We have Edit, Image, Layer, Type, Select, Filter, 3D, View, Plugins, Window, and Help. Okay. So within each of those menus, you have a lot of different options. So throughout the course, as we're kind of learning how to do different things in Photoshop, we'll kind of dive into what some of those do. Okay. With Window, we kind of want to make sure that you're seeing all the things that you need to. So all the proper toolbars that you'll be using as you're working. So there's a few that I personally suggest. The first one is Adjustments. And then we have Layers. Okay, so those 2, Adjustments and Layers, when you have that check mark next to it, means that it's going to show up on your screen. So here on the right-hand side, I have the menus for that. So I have Adjustments and then Layers below it. And then at the very bottom, we have Application Frame, Options, and Tools. So you want to make sure that those 3 are checked. So the Tools is going to be the toolbar that's on the left-hand side. So that's where you have all your cropping, your healing tool, your stamp tool, burn tool, dodge tool, all the things are over there. So you really want to make sure that that's visible. And then Options is going to be up top, and that just gives you the different options of the tools. So if I, have a brush tool, okay, it's going to give me options for the brush, the size, the opacity, the flow, all that good stuff. Okay, so that's really all you need. If you want to see what the other ones look like, by all means, go ahead and try them. But for the most part, you're not really going to need any of the other ones, and it'll just kind of clutter your space. So, take a look at the toolbar first on the left-hand side. So this has pretty much all the tools that you'll be using throughout the semester. What's nice about Photoshop is when you kind of put the mouse over the tool and hover, it gives you a little preview so you can see what it does. Okay? And you can also click on Learn More, and it will open up kind of a new window that just tells you a little bit more information about it. Okay. So with all of the tools in the toolbar, they have kind of sub categories. So when you kind of press and hold, you'll see that there's more options that pop up. Okay, so if you're not seeing a tool where you think it needs to be, so let's say I'm looking for the move tool and I'm looking, I don't see the move tool. I know it's supposed to be this very top one, and just click and hold, and then I have the 2 options for that space, and then I can click on Move Tool. So with each tool, when you kind of press and hold, it will give you some of those multiple options. Okay? So make sure you kind of keep that in mind. So we've got the Move Tool, which is our basic one. We have the Marquee tools, which you'll be able to use to select things. Lasso tool, which also allows you to select. Between those two, those are a little bit more for advanced Photoshop things that we do. Magic wand tool is also used for selecting, but it does it in a different way. The crop tool is one that you will be using very, very often to kind of fix your compositions. Frame tool, similar concept, but it does some other cool stuff where you can kind of blend other images together. Eyedropper tool is used to kind of select colors. Spot healing tool we'll be learning about later on, but it's a nice way to kind of fix imperfections and weird things that are in your photos. Brush tool, use it to paint with. Clone stamp, use it to clone things, so we'll be learning about that one as well later on. History brush is a way to kind of fix and restore things. So if you accidentally do something that you don't like, you can kind of go backwards with that. Eraser tool erases. Paint bucket tool fills in a color. Blur tool will blur. Burn tool will darken areas. Within this one, you also have the dodge tool, which will lighten up areas. Pen tool, we're not really going to be using that as more of a vector-like thing. So if you're familiar with Illustrator at all, use the pen tool in that a lot. Type tool, so if you add text, that's how you go about doing that. Path selection. Will kind of works hand in hand with the pen tool. Rectangular tool draws rectangles, but you can also do other shapes. So also, for those of you familiar with Illustrator, kind of falls in that realm. Hand tool is just a way to kind of move things around. So if you're zoomed in, you can kind of move stuff. Then the zoom tool to get up close and personal to your image. Okay, so those are really all the tools that we'll be using. Below that, there are options for colors. So if you're going to be adding colors using the paint bucket, the brush tool, that's where you can kind of tweak and add those things. Okay. With each tool, you do have options of what it does. So we'll look at kind of the burn tool because it acts similar to a paintbrush. So you'll see that up top, the options bar changes because I clicked on that one. So you have options for size, the type of brush you're using, how hard it is, so like the edges, range, so are you dealing with the shadows of the picture, the midtones or the highlights, exposure, so how intense it changes it, kind of goes from there. So with each tool, you'll kind of see different options pop up. So for cropping, you can do specific ratios if you want. So if we're doing something for, let's say, a 4x5 show, we have that option. If you want to create something that's square-like, you have that option. So lots of different things there. Okay. On the right-hand side, we have the two windows that I suggested that you have opened up. So we have the adjustments and then the layers. So with the adjustments, these are really what you're going to be using to kind of edit and tweak your image. So using levels, using color balance, hue, saturation, all that good stuff. Okay. You can also access them up top but it does it in a slightly different way, which we'll get into details during those demos. Below that, we have our layers. So the layers, Photoshop works in a way where you kind of stack images one on top of the other. So with this, you have your original picture. You're able to make copies of it. So I suggest always making a copy and working on that. But as you start to, do stuff, you'll be able to, alter and tweak. Okay, so I kind of created a blank layer, painted on it with white, and it's directly on top of my original picture. So if I hide that, it kind of goes away. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with that, and we'll kind of go into more details with how the layers really work later on in that demo. From here, we'll talk about saving. So saving is going to be very, very important. You want to save your photography often because technology can sometimes, have little hiccups. So I suggest to save often. So when you first start to do some editing, the first time you save, you'll want to go to File, Save As. Okay. So with this, it opens up the Save As window. So you'll be able to rename your file. You'll be able to give it a new home. You'll be able to alter the format. So you'll notice, just right off the bat, your image is going to be a JPEG. So the format is JPEG. Under the Save As, it shows .jpg. As soon as you start to add layers and really edit, you'll notice that the file type, the format, changes to Photoshop. So down here, our format says Photoshop. Up here in the Save As, it's .psd. Okay, so this means that it's a Photoshop file. So it has all of those layers. You're able to still tweak, change, all the things. So I suggest, starting off with it as Photoshop file because you never know. Maybe you're in the middle of editing a picture and the bell's going to ring. So you'll just have to save it as a Photoshop so that way you can go back and finish up on it. But naming your file is going to be really important. So for this, you're going to type in your last name, then the project name, and then a number. Okay, so for the different projects, you'll be turning in multiple images. So you would have last name project 1, last name project 2, last name project 3, so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm just gonna, last name project 1 because this is the first picture I'm editing. I'm gonna pick my location. If your window doesn't look like this, you do have ways to kind of tweak the view because maybe yours automatically looks like this. Okay, so for that, you just click the little downward arrow and it'll kind of open it up for you. Okay, so I've got that. Save it. And life is good. Okay, so now if my computer decides to crash, I have that file saved. Okay. Later on, when you're saving your images, you will have to save them in a certain way, and we'll kind of leave that for another demo. Okay, but all of your kind of in-progress pictures, so at the end of class, make sure you get those uploaded to Google Drive. You can put them in that folder under the project. If you want to organize things even more and have a subfolder for in-progress pictures, a folder for initial images, and a folder for final pictures, by all means, go for it, do whatever makes the most sense to you. And that is kind of the basics of kind of what the Photoshop layout looks like.